The scoreboard reads 6-4, 4-6, 6-3. Match over. Jasmine Powellini wins. And for 3 or 4 seconds, Wimbledon center court goes quiet in that specific way. It only goes quiet when the wrong name is about to be read out. Then Alexandra Eala turns to face the stands, lifts both hands above her head, and presses her fingers into the shape of a heart. The crowd does not groan. The crowd erupts. Because for 2 weeks at this Wimbledon, Alexandra Eala had signed autographs after every single match, sometimes for what felt like hours. "Thank you so much," she told one fan through the fence. "Did you enjoy the match?" And when the answer came back yes, she smiled and said, "Yeah, I love that." A fourth-round loss was not going to break that habit. So a fourth-round exit somehow became bigger news than the trophy itself. And in the next 90 seconds, you will understand exactly why. This is not a rivalry story. This is not underdog beats champion, loses next round, gets forgotten by Monday. This is something stranger, a structural shift in what a tennis tournament actually measures now that every match lives on a phone screen as much as a scoreboard. Because by the numbers that matter to broadcasters, sponsors and federations, Alexandra Eala did not lose Wimbledon 2026. In every way that counts to a network executive, she may have won it. Here is the state of the board, 7 days before that heart gesture, laid out in the order it actually happened, because the order is what makes this worth telling. Eala arrived at the All England club as the number 29 seed, the first Filipino, man or woman, ever seated at Wimbledon in the Open era. That alone was a footnote. What came next was not. Exhibit A, Monday, June 30th, an outer court, court 12. Eala beats Renata Zarazua, 6-1, 6-2. Ordinarily a routine first-round result on a small court draws a small crowd. This one didn't behave that way. Broadcasters described the atmosphere on that outer court as closer to a semi-final than an opener. And after the match, Eala did what she always does. She walked to the barrier and signed autographs for as long as fans stayed. One Philippine broadcaster called it working the fence like a champion at a trophy ceremony. Notice the order. The winning came first. The connection came right after, every single time. That pattern would repeat all fortnight, and it is the reason this whole story exists. Exhibit B, Wednesday, July 2nd. Eala drops the first set to Australia's Maya Joint, then claws back to win 3-6, 6-2, 6-0. In her on-court interview, she mentions, almost as an aside, that it's her coach Juan Bosch's birthday. Center court, a crowd famous across tennis for polite, controlled applause and not much else, spontaneously sings happy birthday to a Spanish coach they have never met. Then Eala walks to the fence. And signs autographs again. Read that last part twice. The affection had already stopped being only about her. It had started belonging to the people around her too. Now here's what most people missed while they were still just watching the score. Exhibit C, and this is where the story stops being a nice anecdote and becomes something closer to a market signal. Friday, July 4th, center court. Eala beats the defending champion, Iga Swiatek, 7-6, 6-2. According to The Guardian, highlights of that single match pulled 1.2 million views on Wimbledon's own YouTube channel, before Eala had even walked out for her next round. That number was reportedly more than double the combined traffic of matches involving Novak Djokovic and Serena Williams. Read that sentence again, slowly. Not Djokovic-level attention. Djokovic plus Serena-level attention, on Wimbledon's own platform, for a woman who, before this tournament, had never reached a single Grand Slam quarterfinal. Wimbledon's own official Facebook account posted footage of Eala signing autographs after that win, captioning it themselves and describing the ecstatic fans who had just watched her beat the world number 2. The most protocol-obsessed tournament in tennis was curating her fan interactions like they were part of the official broadcast. Wimbledon had adopted her. Here's a moment for anyone who has been in Eala's corner since before this run started. Every Filipino fan who said she was going to be different, back when she was ranked outside the top 140. Every fan who defended her wildcards as something more than tokenism. They just watched the most famous tennis tournament on earth publish the receipts, in real time, on its own channels. You were not wrong. You were just early. Back in the Philippines, this had stopped being treated as a sports story. It was being treated as a national one. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. issued a public statement on July 5 calling Eala a true inspiration, especially for younger Filipinos, and describing her run as world-class. Watch-along parties spread across the country, according to The Guardian. A sitting head of state commenting on a round of 16 result is not really a tennis fact anymore. That's a cultural fact. Let that sink in for a full second. A sitting president, speaking publicly about a single tennis match. Then came Powellini. Pauwalaini had not shown up to center court for the atmosphere. She came for something specific, payback. 4 months earlier in Dubai, Eala had beaten her 6-1, 7-6. Now, as the number 13 seed and a former Wimbledon finalist, Pauwalaini wanted the record corrected, and she had every right to want it. The heat on court that day reached 31 degrees Celsius, the kind of heat that saps a serve before the third set even starts. Eala's second serve, per The Guardian, drifted across the net at times as slow as 65 miles per hour, a number that would worry any tennis fan watching closely. Pauwalaini took the first set, 6-4. This is exactly the point where the story could have collapsed into its most familiar shape.
Talented young player. Deep run. Gracious defeat. Forgotten by the weekend.
Eala did not read that script. Not against a former finalist, not in 31-degree heat, not with a serve that had stopped cooperating.
She broke back.
She took the second set, 6-4, on her own terms. And even when she lost serve at 4-3 in the decider, even as the match slipped away on back-to-back errors, the crowd in and around center court did not move. They had stopped watching for a result days earlier. They were only watching her. That is not a loss playing out. That is a following, watching its own story unfold. Asked about the serve afterward, Eala did not deflect, and did not make excuses. In her own words to the press, as recorded by The Guardian, "My serve was not as good as maybe other matches, but I have days like that. Everyone has days where they don't play their best. I understand that's part of the job. I don't think I'm going to be playing the best tennis of my life every single day.
I don't expect that."
And then she gave her fans the line they will carry into the next slam. Never say die, and play every point like your life depends on it.
Hold on to that phrase.
It is the closest thing this fortnight has to a motto, and we'll come back to it before we're done. That same night on Instagram, she posted her own reflection on the loss.
Tough loss today.
But dropping this here as a reminder to be happy about living out your dreams, even if it comes with bad days. That was the real emotional peak of the whole fortnight, not a trophy, a sentence. She refused to let a scoreboard decide what her fans took home with them. Now here is the authority validation, and it comes from names that do not hand out attention casually. 12 singles majors. 39 Grand Slam titles across singles and doubles. Founder of the Women's Tennis Association. A woman who fought for equal prize money before most of the sport was even ready to imagine it. On July 4th, hours after the Swiatek win, Billie Jean King posted a photograph of herself with Eala, writing that it was a treat to spend time with her, fresh off her historic win at Wimbledon. The post drew roughly 81,000 likes and 700 comments. King went on to publicly call the run an inspiration for young people in the Philippines and beyond. Meanwhile, in the royal box for the Pauwalaini match, sat Roger Federer, confirmed by Pauwalaini herself in her own on-court interview afterward. Federer did not fly in for a 10th seed against a former finalist. The names in that box tell you exactly which match Wimbledon considered the real event that day, and it was not the one with the bigger trophy on the line. The greatest ambassador Wimbledon has ever produced showed up for an Eala match. When those two names orbit your fourth-round appearance, you are no longer a story tennis is discovering. You are a story tennis is following. The consequences are already moving in the real world, and they are not small. The Philippine Sports Commission has confirmed the country will host a WTA event, a direct market response to the demand Eala has generated. A nation with, as one outlet put it, virtually no professional pedigree in this sport is now on the WTA's map, because one player redrew it. That is not a marketing decision made in a boardroom. That is a boardroom reacting to a fanbase that already existed and simply never had a reason to show itself before. Think about what that means for a diaspora spread across tens of millions of people, from Dubai to Los Angeles to Toronto to Sydney, watching a young woman from Manila fill stadiums in a sport their home country never structurally invested in. These are people who grew up watching other countries produce Grand Slam champions while Filipino tennis stayed a rumor, a maybe, a someday. For 2 weeks, someday arrived, and it arrived loudly. That is not fandom anymore. That is identity, crossing a border, and finding somewhere new to live. You'd think a round of 16 result would fade from the conversation by the following weekend.
It didn't.
If anything, the story only grew louder after the loss, not quieter, which tells you everything about what people were actually watching this fortnight for. Here is the recap, in order, because the order is the whole story and it explains everything else you just heard.
Court 12 on a Monday.
Birthday song sung in a stadium famous for silence. A defending champion beaten on the grass she owns.
A president speaking from Manila. Billie Jean King on Instagram.
Roger Federer in the royal box. 1.2 million views before the next ball was even struck. And a pair of hands shaped into a heart, walking toward a tunnel after a loss that somehow did not feel like one. Alex Eala left Wimbledon 2026 with a round of 16 exit on her official record, and something no other player left the tournament holding, something no other player in that entire draw could claim. She was the biggest attraction of the tournament, measured not in trophies, but in traffic, in queues, in presidential statements, in decibels. So here's the question worth arguing over, and it's a real one. Was Alex Eala the biggest story of Wimbledon 2026, bigger than the woman who actually lifted the trophy? Or is that just Filipino pride talking louder than a scoreline? Both answers have a case. Put your answer in the comments below. I want to see the argument made properly, not just a one-word reply. We are not going to predict what happens next. That is not this channel's job tonight. What we can tell you is where the next room is. The Canadian Open is next, part of the North American hardcourt swing, and Eala is projected to enter as a seeded player at a WTA 1000 event for the first time in her career. After that comes the US Open, where she has already confirmed an exhibition against American teenager Eva Ivoi, the kind of matchup tennis needs, about to be broadcast to the biggest tennis audience on the planet. And whenever that WTA Philippines event finally lands a date on the calendar, expect the celebration to be visible from space. Never say die, and play every point like your life depends on it. Remember where that line came from. Remember the hands shaped like a heart, walking toward the tunnel after a loss that did not feel like one. If you have been following Alex Eala since back when convincing your friends she was going to matter felt like a personal argument, this channel is where the rest of that community lives. Subscribe, because the people who saw this coming deserve a room to celebrate it in. Think back to where this fortnight started. Court 12, a Monday afternoon, a seed number most casual fans never bothered to notice. Nobody in that small crowd on day one knew they were watching the opening scene of something that would end with a president's statement, a Hall of Famer's Instagram post, and Roger Federer sitting in the royal box. That is how these stories usually work. Nobody rings a bell to tell you it has started. You only recognize it once you are already inside it, looking back at Monday. The Canadian Open is where the next chapter starts, and this time, the whole tennis world will already be watching before she even walks on court.
We will see you there.